The transformation from the Ottoman Empire to a modern nation-state marked one of the most significant political shifts of the 20th century. It was not merely a change in leadership or borders, but a complete redefinition of power, identity, and belonging. Authority moved away from an empire that ruled over diverse peoples through dynastic legitimacy and religious hierarchy, toward a nation built on shared citizenship, defined territory, and national sovereignty. This shift reshaped governance, society, and the political imagination of millions. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire functioned as a multi-ethnic, multi-religious imperial system. Loyalty was owed primarily to the Sultan, whose authority rested on dynastic tradition, and later religious legitimacy as caliph. Subjects were categorized not as equal citizens, but as members of religious communities, or millets, each governed by its own laws and customs. This system allowed diversity to exist under imperial control, but it did not foster a unified political identity across the population. By the 19th century, this imperial structure was under severe strain. Military defeats, economic dependency, and nationalist movements within the empire exposed the limits of empire-wide rule. European ideas of nationalism and citizenship began to challenge the old order, promoting the notion that legitimacy should come from the people rather than a ruling dynasty. Attempts at reform, particularly during the Tanzimat era, sought to modernize the empire and create equal Ottoman citizenship, but these efforts remained incomplete and unevenly enforced. The final collapse came after World War I. Defeat on the battlefield and occupation by foreign powers shattered what remained of imperial authority. The Treaty of Sèvres proposed to divide Ottoman lands among external forces, threatening the very existence of Anatolia as a political unit. In this moment of crisis, the idea of empire proved unable to mobilize effective resistance. What emerged instead was a new political vision centered on the nation. The shift from empire to nation-state was driven by a fundamental change in how power was understood. Sovereignty was no longer seen as the property of a ruling family or a sacred office, but as the collective right of a defined population living within a specific territory. This concept stood in sharp contrast to the Ottoman system, where borders were fluid and authority extended over diverse regions with little emphasis on a shared national identity. The rise of the national movement in Anatolia marked the practical beginning of this transformation. Resistance leaders argued that survival depended on unity around a common political identity. Rather than defending a crumbling empire, they called for the defense of the homeland and the rights of its people. This shift in language, from subjects of an empire to members of a nation, signaled a profound change in political consciousness. Institutionally, the creation of a representative assembly in Ankara symbolized the transfer of power from imperial centers to a national authority. This body claimed legitimacy not through tradition or religion, but through representation of the people. It asserted that laws, governance, and national decisions should be made in the name of the nation itself. This was a decisive break from centuries of centralized imperial rule emanating from the palace. The abolition of the Sultanate formalized this shift. With the end of dynastic rule, the political foundation of the empire collapsed. Authority was no longer inherited, it was constructed through institutions and laws. The declaration of a republic further reinforced the idea that the state belonged to its citizens, not to a ruler. Citizenship replaced subjecthood as the defining relationship between the individual and the state. Territorial identity became another key element of the nation-state. Unlike the empire, which governed vast and diverse lands across continents, the new state defined itself within clear borders. These borders were defended not as imperial possessions, but as the homeland of a nation. This territorial focus helped consolidate political loyalty and made sovereignty tangible and defensible. The concept of shared citizenship transformed social relations as well. Legal reforms abolished distinctions based on religion in public law, establishing equality before the state. While cultural and religious diversity continued to exist, the state no longer recognized separate legal communities. Instead, all individuals were bound by the same laws and granted the same civic status. This change aimed to create unity and reduce divisions that had been embedded in the imperial system. Education played a central role in reinforcing national identity. Schools were redesigned to promote a common language, shared history, and civic values. Rather than emphasizing loyalty to a dynasty or religious authority, education encouraged identification with the nation and its institutions. This process helped cultivate a sense of belonging that transcended local or communal affiliations. Economic policy also reflected the new national framework. Imperial economic structures, often shaped by foreign privileges and regional inequalities, were replaced with efforts to build a national economy. State-led development, infrastructure projects, and industrialization were presented as tools for strengthening independence and reducing external dependence. Economic participation became another way citizens were integrated into the national project. The shift from empire to nation-state was not without tension. The imperial past could not be erased overnight, and resistance to rapid change existed among various segments of society. Some viewed the loss of imperial identity as a cultural rupture, while others feared that centralized national authority might suppress local traditions. These debates reflected the broader challenge of redefining identity after centuries of imperial rule. Despite these challenges, the nation-state model proved effective in mobilizing political loyalty and international recognition. In a world increasingly organized around nation-states, imperial structures struggled to survive. The new state gained legitimacy not only internally, but also on the global stage, where sovereignty was defined by clear borders and recognized governments rather than dynastic claims. The shift also altered the relationship between the state and the individual. Citizenship carried both rights and responsibilities. Participation in political life, military service, and economic contribution were framed as duties owed to the nation. In return, the state promised protection, equality before the law, and opportunities for advancement. This reciprocal relationship differed sharply from the imperial model, where obligations flowed primarily in one direction, from subject to ruler. Over time, the idea of shared citizenship became the foundation of national unity. While social and political debates continued, the core principle that power belonged to the nation remained intact. The memory of empire survived in history and culture, but it no longer defined political authority. The shift from empire to nation-state was therefore more than a political transition. It was a reimagining of power itself. It replaced rule over diverse subjects with governance of equal citizens. It transformed territory from imperial possession into national homeland, and it redefined legitimacy as something derived from the collective will rather than inherited tradition. In the end, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire did not simply mark the end of an old order. It opened the path to a new political reality in which citizenship, territorial identity, and national sovereignty became the pillars of statehood. This transformation continues to shape political life today, standing as a defining moment in the passage from empire to modern nation.